Hi, I'm Mary Carollo, and we're going to be discussing educational neuroscience. Educational neuroscience is an emerging scientific field that brings together researchers in cognitive neuroscience, developmental cognitive neuroscience, educational psychology, educational technology, education theory, and other related disciplines. This gives educators a better understanding of learning abilities, learning disabilities, and learning problems. It also makes it easier for teachers to develop strategies for teaching these children's abilities and disabilities. The educational neuroscience brings together how the brain works, psychology, and education. Neuroscience used to be linked directly to education in one straight line. It's no longer that way. Now we have neuroscience that bridges together cognitive psychology, educational psychology, and education to be more cohesive and to make a better educational plan. Doctors are also finding that educational neuroscience is translated into dyslexia and dyslexia research. That educational neuroscientists can examine and translate information from the brain and how the brain processes information in dyslexic children. They're able to discover how the brain changes the different information in varying environments. They're also able to see what interventions work better with the brain to curb the effects of dyslexia in children. They've also determined that there's transitional implementation, and they can better understand what affects the brain and not just the child. Educational neuroscience also deals with language processing, and they can develop markers in the semantics, the phonetics, and the syntax processing with the neuroscience of language. They can also develop the interventions. So for special education students, early diagnosis is needed along with monitoring and comparison of the effects of different kinds of educational input on learning, and an increased understanding of individual differences in learning and the best ways to suit input to the learner. So it's through the brain, not just the person sitting there, is how it processes through their brain. Then we have language and literacy, how the neuroscience is used in the early developmental stages of learning to read, and they have had significant information and development for the last decade. That there's clear indications that the neural substrates for all levels of language can be identified at early points in development, and at the same time, intervention studies have demonstrated the ways in which the brain retains its plasticity for language processing. And if there is a deficit, then they have to have intense remediation with an auditory language processing program in order to make up for any deficits they have in that department. They also have for neuroscience with mathematics and dyscalculia. So students that are having issues with math and they need to develop their brain towards dyscalculia, the application of neuroscience to understanding mathematical processes has already resulted in understanding beyond the early cognitive theories. So before learning, they can develop innately. Cognitive neuroscience research has revealed the existence of an innate number system present in animals and infants as well as adults, that it represents for basic knowledge about numbers and their relations. The system is located in the parietal lobe of the brain in each hemisphere, which goes along with neuromyths that we will discuss later, that you use both sides of your brain. The parietal system is active in children and adults during basic numerical tasks, but over the course of development, it appears to become more specialized. And furthermore, children with mathematical learning disabilities, specifically dyscalculia, show weaker activation in that region in the brain. So it's not a learned behavior, it's actually something made up in their brain. and that it makes it difficult for them to do basic number tasks, counting, sorting, stuff like that. These results show how neuroimaging can provide important information about the links between basic cognitive functions and higher learning abilities in math. For social and emotional neuroscience, that there is emotion in learning, that students can be afraid, can enjoy certain subjects, and understanding the ability to learn and socially adequate and socially understanding the information. Then neuromyths. So neuromyths kind of go hand in hand, well, not hand in hand anymore. They're terms that refer to scientific information. Well, it's really misinformation. So it's myths that maybe parents or teachers used to hand down and give easy excuses for why things didn't work a certain way or why somebody didn't understand anything. So common educational neuromyths were you're either left-brained or right-brained. You use both sides of your brain all the time. It's not one or the other. Another common neuromyth would be that we only use 10% of our brain. Once again, you use all of your brain all of the time. Another learning myth would be learning styles, that not specifically certain learning styles go to certain way people learn. However, I know I learn better when I can actually read it instead of listening. So I guess it depends on the person as well. There's also a critical learning periods in brain development that during a certain time a person has to learn something or they won't be able to learn it. That's a neuromyth as well. Another one would be common signs of dyslexia is seeing letters backwards. That's not a common sign of dyslexia. Mental capacity is something you're born with and cannot be changed. That's not true. It's the nature versus nurture argument. It depends on how you learn, where you learn, what you learn. When we sleep, our brain shuts down. That's not true. Our brain constantly goes 24 hours a day. And then one I was actually surprised about personally was that listening to classical music increases a child's reasoning ability. That's not true. So we don't have to play Mozart when the kids are taking a test.